We are following major breaking news tonight. Singer David has been arrested in connection to the murder of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas, according to the LAPD. This is a case that stretches back more than 2 years to when she was last seen alive. Her decomposed body found in the trunk of David's Tesla late last year.
This didn't just put someone back in headlines. It dragged everything back into the spotlight, whether people were ready for it or not. Because just when it felt like things were starting to settle, like the noise was fading and attention was shifting elsewhere, something hit the timeline that pulled everything right back.
Public information officer with the Los Angeles Police Department on social media announcing the singer, known as David, had been arrested by homicide detectives in LA, quote, for the murder of Celeste Rivas. Now, David, his real name is David Burke. He is now being held without bond, and he hasn't been charged as of yet. The LAPD says that his case will be presented to the DA on Monday for filing consideration. We're going to go over the process here in just a moment. This is a case that has taken months to get to this point. I know so many of you have been following this, and now it seems like the next step, a major step, is still something that's going to take some time before we learn a lot of information about this case. And we'll be talking to former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani about that here in just a moment. But as we focus now on this announcement, it may feel like a long time coming because David was announced as a suspect in November of 2025. Now, before we get into what will happen next, I do want to get you up to speed on this case because it is one that has been going on in some ways months, in other ways years. According to the LAPD, this all started in September of 2025, and that is when officers responded to an impounded lot in Hollywood after there were reports of a foul odor coming from a vehicle, a Tesla. Now, that vehicle, it had been towed days earlier after it was found on a street, abandoned, it seemed, in Los Angeles. Now, police say that vehicle, that Tesla, it was registered to David Burke. Many people in the music community know him by just one name, David, D4vd's. Now, when detectives searched that car, they found a body, and that body was later identified as a 14-year-old girl, her name, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her body was in the front storage area of the Tesla. That's like the trunk of the vehicle, and it was in a state of decomposition, law enforcement said. Investigators have said that Celeste may have been dead for weeks before she was discovered. The teen's mom told investigators that she was last seen and heard from in April of 2024. So here we are in April of 2026 with David now under arrest in connection to her murder. The last time she was seen alive, according to her mom, all the way back roughly 2 years ago. Her mom also added another point about her daughter, and it was that she had a boyfriend named David. Now, by late 2025, sources were telling ABC News that David was being considered a suspect in the case, but no charges had been filed. Yet behind the scenes, a grand jury had been hearing evidence in the case, including Burke's reported travel to the Santa Barbara area of California during the spring of 2025, and a search of the Hollywood Hills property where he was reportedly staying, and reports of a high-heat burn cage found at that location. Then we go to January of this year, 2026. David's alleged close friend, a man named Neo Langston, was arrested in Montana for failing to appear as a witness in a Los Angeles grand jury investigation. And a week after that, Langston was spotted entering a Los Angeles courthouse and reportedly testified before the grand jury. But since then, for the most part, frankly, crickets in this case. No real developments, of course, until now. Joining us now to talk about this breaking news, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, president.
A report, a claim, a supposed final decision that, if taken at face value, changes everything in the most extreme way possible. And instantly, the calm disappeared because people weren't prepared for that level of escalation.
Not now.
Not after everything that had already been said, debated, picked apart. Most assumed whatever was coming next would follow a predictable path. That assumption collapsed immediately. What replaced it was confusion first, then shock, then a wave of reactions that didn't wait for confirmation, didn't pause for clarity, didn't slow down long enough to ask whether everything being said actually lined up. Because when something this extreme enters the conversation, people don't process it carefully. They react to it emotionally. And that reaction spreads faster than anything else. Within minutes, timelines were flooded again. Not with clear information, but with fragments, headlines without context, clips without full audio, statements being repeated without verification. And each repetition made it feel more real.
Of West Coast trial lawyers, always great to have you on Law & Crime. Big story out of Los Angeles tonight. Just what's your reaction? Because we have been covering this for so long about David's arrest.
Chris, my reaction is better late than never. I think this was something that we've all been expecting. When a body is found decomposing in the frunk of your Tesla, and there has been a young girl who's been missing for quite some time, and there's plenty of evidence that she ran away with you or a member of your entourage. I think there was a lot of evidence here pointing to David, and really the question was, what really took so long? And I think my initial reaction is, I live and work in LA. I respect law enforcement, that things can move slowly here. But I think this investigative grand jury, really is the answer. I think the DA wanted to lock in some members of David's inner circle to make sure that they cooperate, they don't go sideways at trial. And I think that's what they were waiting on before they ended up arresting.
So the announcement that came from the LAPD's TIO account says he's been arrested in connection to the murder of Celeste Rivas. And then it says that he's being held without bond. And then the case is going to be reviewed by the DA's office on Monday, or it goes in front of the DA's office on Monday. Like, if you can just walk us through the process of how that works, as opposed to them saying tonight, he has been charged with this and he's going to make his first appearance tomorrow.
Well, typically when you're talking about the DA, it's a reactive case. It's not like this. The law enforcement, they arrest someone, they prepare a report, that file lands on the DA's desk, and there's a charging DA that makes a decision. It's a little bit different in this case because it's more of a proactive investigation. Obviously, Celeste Rivas has been missing for quite some time and has been dead for also quite some time. So you have this case that has been worked on for more than 6 months now. I mean, I think, if I recall correctly, Celeste's body was found in September. Yeah. We all saw the video of the car being impounded and that search. Then, of course, law enforcement executed search warrants at David's home, again, months and months ago. So this is the type of case that isn't just a file that lands on some DA's desk. This is a case that is being directed by prosecutors at the district attorney's office. They convene this investigative grand jury, and we know that a grand jury has two functions. In most states and at the federal level, their function is to indict, but it also has an investigative function. They have subpoena power, so they can subpoena people, witnesses, they can subpoena information and documents, and that's what the grand jury was doing in this case. So it seems to me that the prosecution has this all buttoned up right now. This isn't the type of case they're reacting to. This is a case where they think we not only have enough probable cause to get that arrest warrant and get past a preliminary hearing, but we have enough to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury at trial.
Do you think that this came as a surprise to David tonight, this arrest?
I think, given how long it's taken, many folks have forgotten about it, but obviously there's been a lot of attention on this case, and frankly, a lot of negative media attention. Again, I sit here in LA, and a lot of folks ask me, what is LAPD doing? How could a young girl be missing for so long? How could her teacher give an interview saying that she ran off with someone named David? How could her body be...
Certain volume? If enough people are saying the same thing at once, it starts to feel like confirmation, even when the details are still unstable. That's exactly what happened here. One side immediately locked into the idea that this was the inevitable end point, that everything leading up to this moment had been pointing towards something final, something irreversible. They didn't hesitate. They accepted it as fact and moved forward from there. The other side did the opposite. They questioned everything. They looked at how fast the claim appeared, how little verified information was attached to it, how inconsistent some of the details seemed when you actually slowed down and examined them, and instead of accepting it, they pushed back. That clash created something bigger than the situation itself. Because now it wasn't just about the reported decision. It was about whether people should believe it at all. And that kind of divide doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Every platform turned into a battleground of interpretation.
Found in the trunk of a vehicle. I mean, even if it was an accident, that in and of itself is potentially a crime. So why haven't any arrests been made? And I think really now we're going to know the answer very soon. I think the information is going to come out. We're going to have a lot more of the evidence, whether it's witness testimony, cooperators, whether it's electronic evidence, cell phones, social media. There's a lot of people watching social media, sleuths, detectives. You know, they've followed that digital footprint, right? And they've seen, you know, pictures, images on social media, the two seemingly together. And I think all those are sort of bricks in the wall that are going to eventually be the reason that David is convicted in this case.
And beyond that too, I mean, I think when you think about the LAPD, like celebrities, it's not a big deal for them in the way that it might be for other police departments across the country. When you look at the timeline, you know, yeah, the case like certainly has these elements that we followed the developments along the way, but how much did the celebrity of David add to the timeline it took for him to be arrested in connection to this? And we'll see what they specifically accuse him of.
Well, it's interesting. The celebrity factor, people think it helps. I don't necessarily think it helps being a celebrity in LA. In fact, it draws more attention to it. I mean, obviously, look, you know, the case I kind of give the example of recently, she was just sentenced, Matthew Perry, right? He was involved in a drug-related death. He was a victim. But the fact that, you know, the ketamine queen, Jasmine Song, killing Matthew Perry, that, and again, I'm not naive, that case was treated differently than the 2019 case when she killed someone with ketamine. So, you know, the celebrity factor draws attention to it. The reality is we're talking about the case here on Law and Crime because it's David. And, you know, there are many young girls that go missing, and I'm not talking about it. I'm not asked to speak about it. And it doesn't make it any different. It doesn't make it any less right. There's women that are trafficked, they're sexually abused, they're victims of violence, they're even murdered. You know, hundreds, thousands every single day. So I think the celebrity factor probably ended up drawing more attention to it, both law enforcement and prosecution attention to the case because of who David is.
Right. And even when you think of LA, I mean, we've talked about Nick Reiner recently, very different circumstances in that case. But I mean, just the amount of attention, the amount of cameras at court when he makes an appearance, it's just different than other families that have dealt with issues like that. When you look at this case going forward, I remember Neil Langston, one of David's friends, he gets arrested for not cooperating with this grand jury. What stands out to you just about the way, from at least on the outside, it seems that prosecutors have been going about this?
Yeah, think about that case. If I recall correctly, here's someone who refused to testify before the grand jury, and the DA's office went out of state to get an arrest warrant to bring him back to California. I mean, that's how seriously they're taking this case, if I recall correctly. So this isn't any other case. This isn't any other runaway. This isn't any other young girl who is the victim of violence. I mean, this case has been treated differently, as it should. Look, I wish LAPD had unlimited resources and time to go after all these cases, all these young girls. Their lives matter, and it's sad that this is unfortunately a tale that's all too common. Obviously, we don't know what happened here. We don't know if it was an accident, she was murdered intentionally, she overdosed, she was trafficked. I mean, there's all sorts of speculation out there. I don't know exactly what happened, but what we do know is this is
pointing to different clips, arguing over what counted as credible and what didn't. And the more they argued, the less clear everything became, because nobody had the full picture, just pieces. And pieces can be arranged in a lot of different ways depending on what someone already believes. That's where things start to spiral. Not because new facts are being introduced, but because existing fragments are being interpreted in completely different directions at the same time. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the background. A noticeable lack of definitive clarification. No immediate overwhelming statement cutting through the noise and resetting the narrative. Just a gap where clarity should have been. And that gap, it gave the chaos room to grow. Because when there's space between a claim and confirmation, people fill that space themselves with theories, with assumptions, with conclusions that feel right in the moment, even if they don't hold up later. That's what turned this from a report into a full-blown storm, because
said, I don't like to schedule it that last day because there could be unexpected circumstances just with the court system in general. So they have scheduled it for May 1st, but significantly, they will all be back in front of the judge the afternoon of April 29th in order for the defense to determine whether or not the prosecution has handed over enough evidence where they think they can properly defend their client at the hearing. The judge making a point that although statutory law requires the prosecution to hand over everything prior to trial, they are not required to do that for a preliminary hearing. They just have to hand over sufficient evidence that is most favorable to the defendant in order to prove probable cause. So that afternoon of April 29th, the defense will determine if they think they have enough evidence to continue with this speedy preliminary hearing.
Dina, let me ask you this. The autopsy report that came out yesterday, is that a reason why we didn't have a preliminary hearing today? Did they talk about that? Because there's a lot in that report. That's the official cause of death. We know the defense has said that David is not the cause of death. Did that come up today?
That did not come up. As they really spoke about the fact that they have a wide range of evidence that the defense has not getting. Specifically, they actually highlighted the fact that they have this significant amount of child pornography on his iPhone, but they did not get into the specifics of the medical examiner's report.
Okay, so talk to me about the big bombshell. Apparently they found what, or allegedly found what, on David's devices?
So she said the words, the prosecution said, a significant amount of child pornography. And she raised this saying it is going to be different. You cannot hand over that type of evidence to the defense as you would the rest of the evidence. The defense has to instead have somebody, a counsel or an expert, go to the county and actually look at a determined computer to look at this because of the sensitive nature of that evidence. The prosecution also highlighting the amount of this evidence and the evidence on the data and the cell phone in general because of the difficulty and how long it takes to hand and transfer over this kind of amount of evidence.
Okay, put your legal cap on. Are we talking potential federal charges? You and I both know that if someone is caught with allegedly child sexual abuse material on their devices, that could be federal charges.
That's a really great point, and it's very possible federal charges may come. At this point, though, it definitely is relevant and probative to one of the three charges. There are three charges against him: murder, continuous child sex abuse, and mutilation of a corpse. So this specific child pornography evidence is definitely going to be used by prosecution for that continuous child sexual abuse. But whether or not the federal prosecutors decide to add charges, we will wait and see.
Just want to clarify, any idea who was portrayed in these, this footage, these videos, this data on his phone? Is it Celeste? Is it someone else? Did prosecutors acknowledge that? And let me be clear, allegedly on his phone. Did they say the identity?
It's about how information moves when the stakes feel this high. How quickly people are willing to accept something extreme if it fits into the narrative they already have in their head, and how hard it is to pull things back once that acceptance spreads. There's also a psychological layer here that doesn't get talked about enough. People are drawn to finality, to decisive, irreversible outcomes. Even when those outcomes are uncomfortable, even when they raise more questions than answers, there's something about them that captures attention in a way nothing else does. That's why this didn't just trend. It stuck. Because it hit that exact point where curiosity, shock, and uncertainty all collide at once. And once that collision happens, it's hard to look away. Even people who normally avoid this kind of content found themselves pulled in, trying to figure out what was actually going on, trying to separate what's real from what's just being repeated. And that process, it's messy, because not everything can be verified in real time. not every
penetrate skin and underlying tissue and go into the liver and then into the space around the lung. Is it, what exactly is it? That's really the question, and I don't know that they'll be able to say exactly the weapon that was used.
Is there, and I'm going to go through this more. I don't want to ask this question. I have to ask this question. Is there anything in here to indicate that she was alive at the time of dismemberment?
Not from what the medical examiner described. It sounds like classic amputating the body to try to compact it, to hide it, to dispose of it. I've seen that in a number of homicide cases, so nothing that suggests that these amputations occurred while she was alive.
When you go to other parts of the report, they talk about tattoos, and they say description that she had a tattoo on the finger. This is something that we've talked about before. That seemed to be the identifier, one of the ways that they identified her as Celeste. But when you go to other parts of it, other parts of her body, including eye color, cannot assess due to severe post-mortem changes. Is that decomposition? Is that dismemberment? So I guess it becomes a question, how significant is that to determine what exactly happened to her, and how much does that complicate this analysis?
Well, forensic pathologists are skilled at identifying wounds and trauma in all manner of body composition. So all the way from the freshly deceased to the skeletonized to the exhumed body. Taking all of that with the education and experience of the Los Angeles Medical Examiner's Office, they're familiar with the interpretation of wounding in a body and seeing it at this decomposition level. So yes, of course it makes it harder. You have to really call on your knowledge base to interpret the wounds. The eyes being collapsed after death is normal. They lose their turgor. They don't, they're not the same shape. So not being able to see her eye color, that's a completely normal thing in a decomposition like this.
Her weight was 71 pounds. Is that...
Well, you lose a lot of weight also, in this sort of death decomposition process. So that's not reliable as to what her ante-mortem weight was.
I want to go to skin defects. Multiple skin defects are also present over the torso, with many perforating the skin and soft tissue without identifiable soft tissue hemorrhage or associated internal organ injuries. They range from 5/16 inch to 1/4 inches in greatest dimension. Multiple superficial linear abrasions are also noted on the right dorsal hand. The upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment with relatively flat cut surfaces through the soft tissue and bone. No discernible hemorrhage is identified at these sites. Multiple fragments of blue plastic material are found embedded in the cut surfaces. Representative fragments are collected by medical examiner criminalists and submitted to the evidence department on September 8, 2025. The right upper extremity is dismembered 9 inches from the top of the shoulder. The left
up cleanly. And when people realize that, it doesn't always slow them down. Sometimes it pushes them deeper into speculation, deeper into debate, deeper into a situation that keeps evolving faster than it can be understood. That's where this is right now. In that in-between space, not fully confirmed, not fully dismissed, just suspended in a constant loop of reaction and reinterpretation. And as long as it stays there, it stays active because uncertainty fuels engagement more than clarity ever could. Every new post, every new breakdown, every new attempt to explain everything just adds another layer. And those layers don't simplify the situation. They complicate it. They make it harder to see where it started and what actually matters. But one thing is clear, this moment changed the tone completely. The initial impact doesn't disappear. It lingers in the way people talk about it, in the assumptions they carry forward in the next situation that even remotely resembles this one. That's how these moments echo, not just through what actually happened, but through how people experienced it in real time. And right now, people are still in it, still reacting, still trying to make sense of something that refuses to settle into a clear, stable version of events, which means this isn't over. Not because there's guaranteed to be a dramatic twist next, but because the conversation itself hasn't reached a point where it can stop. There are still too many questions, too many conflicting interpretations, too much momentum built around something that hasn't fully resolved. And until that changes, this stays exactly where it is, at the center of attention. Unclear, unstable, and impossible for people to ignore. Because whether the report holds up or not, the reaction already did what it was going to do. It pulled everything back into focus. It forced people to engage. And it created a moment that, regardless of the final,